guys, it's April, and October is sadly gone. It is no longer Fright Month, and it kind of makes me sad, but at the same time, there are other things to come, and I am equally as excited about those as I was about Halloween. So this is going to be my October wrap-up. I'm not going to do a whole month wrap-up because I already did a mid-month wrap-up where I talked about the 13 books I read the first half of this month. So I will link it up there and down there so you can check that out. But I made a promise in that video that I was going to try and read 13 more books, and I did. So this month I read a grand total of 26 books. Holy crackers, which is actually this year's record of books per month. January had been the record holder at 22 books, but I have now surpassed that with 26. I don't know what I was thinking. So yeah. So I will talk about the 13 books that I read in the last half of October. After I reached that 13 books, I kind of just stopped reading altogether so my brain could catch up and I could enjoy Halloween and what Halloween could bring. I will just stop babbling and just get started. The first book that I finished on the second half of October was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This, of course, is part of the reread that I am doing with my roommate. We are, of course, in the fourth month, so we read the fourth book, which is one of the chunkiest books in the series. Not the chunkiest, but one of. And it was just great to get back into this competition and just see how much Harry has actually grown from the beginning and to the end. And it's my childhood in a book. You're welcome. Then I picked up Gallows Hill by Lewis Duncan. This is one of those library book sale hauls that I found, and it seemed like it was going to be a short, little, easy read that was perfect for Halloween because it just screamed creepy. In Gallows Hill, Sarah moves to a new town with her mother because her mother found a boyfriend and decided that it was a good idea to just go and move to a different state to live with him. And this means she has to start at a new school. At this new school, she meets a cast of characters who end up convincing her to pose as a fortune teller at the school fair, where she starts to actually see some actual fortunes. And it just takes off from there. The problem is the town that they have moved to is a very conservative town and doesn't take kindly to anything outside the realm of normal, especially witchcraft. So she gets to deal with all this kind of fallout that happens in a small town when you're a stranger and your mom is the mistress of a married man. It was a weird read. It was, I guess, a little creepy, but there's just so much frustration wrapped up into this book. I most of the time wanted to strangle every single character. There wasn't a one that I did not want to strangle at some point or another. But because it had such a strong pull on my emotion, I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I finally picked up The Circle by Dave Eggers. This one hit really close to home, guys. In this story, May goes to work at The Circle, which is pretty much this huge corporation that has a lot of the social media platforms in it. It has this huge sprawling campus that reminds me a lot of Epic or Google, where, you pretty much end up living on campus and you end up breathing the culture. And it just indoctrinates itself into who you are. The Circle is all about becoming transparent and having all the information available to all people, having no secrets even in your personal life. Anybody can see or hear or do or think or see what you are doing, and it becomes secrets are thievery. That's kind of where it goes. Just because of, being booktube and what I do for a living, which is a lot of internet things. I had some moments where I'm like, if this is really where all of this is going, I don't know if I want to be part of the human race anymore. The funniest part was, in the middle of me reading this book, Clout kindly informed me that I was accepted for another perk. There is a very Clout-like platform, I guess you could call it, rating system inside this book, which does much the same thing, and I was in the middle of reading that part when Clout decided to inform me that I had free stuff. Like I said, this book just left me wondering where all of these social media platforms are gonna go, and the not goodness that could happen if all of them decide to come together as one entity. That is a scary thought. I've had A Dirty Job by Christopher Moore on my shelf for a while. This was actually lent to me by a friend, and I have been a horrible, horrible friend and haven't given it back yet. I've tried to start to read this several times before and have failed. This book is about Charlie, who is a beta male, who suddenly finds himself with the job of being a reaper. This book is not my kind of read. It is very interesting and the storyline is there for me, but the problem is the writing has a crude maturity that I just don't appreciate. It's not something that I enjoy reading, which is why I have always struggled through this read. And so in the end, I had to be honest with myself and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. And because I have seen this book so many times in the October monthly recommendations for creepy reads, Hex Hall was my next read. Hex Hall is by Rachel Hawkins. It is a story about Sophie, who is a witch, but she has some problems controlling her powers, and because of the trouble she gets into, she gets sent to Hex Hall, which is a boarding school for pretty much troubled magic makers, I guess you can call them. While she's there, students are being killed off by something, and so she starts to investigate what all of this is, why all of this is, how all of this is, and at the same time trying to figure out what her magic is and making friends. Unfortunately, it was extremely predictable for me. It's just a problem I seem to have with Hawkins' writing. I do always love the cultural references that Hawkins throws into her writing, so that makes me smile. There wasn't anything really new for me in this book, so I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. And of course I was going to continue on reading all of Ulysses Duncan's books, and that includes The Third Eye. This story is about Karen, who starts to see the reality of some missing children. When she thinks hard enough and she concentrates hard enough, she starts to get connections to these children and decides to team up with the cops to figure out where these children are. I like this kind of read. It is very 1-800 where are you? Unfortunately, it's only one book, and putting a lot of things in a really short book ends up feeling a bit weird. The character development just, I wasn't feeling it. The characters were kind of flat, but the plot, I really, really, really liked the plot. And so in the end, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And of course, I wasn't going to not read Summer of Fear to just round out all the books that I have by her. This book is about Rachel and her cousin Julia, who comes to stay with them after her parents die. Julia is kind of weird and starts to take over Rachel's life, stealing her boyfriend, pretty much stealing her family, stealing her best friends, and Rachel just, she's not gonna have it. This book, okay. The thing I had to keep on reminding myself about this book is that it was written in the 70s. So, it has the stereotypes of the 70s, it has the dialogue of the 70s, and it has the reality of the 70s, which I can't always wrap my brain around. And it might have been because of the time period in which this book was written that I couldn't connect with the characters. They felt flat to me. But it did get really creepy at points, and I may have cried because I have connections with animals. Yeah, I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. And then I finally picked up some more of the Hitchhiker trilogy. So The Restaurant at the End of the Universe and Life, the Universe, and Everything, which is of course book 2 and book 3 in the trilogy. This of course continues Arthur Dent's journey through the universe and all the weird things that go on, and I just love Douglas Adams' writing. It's just it's great. It's great. So I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. I don't really know how to explain these books without really, these books, just the way they're written. I don't know. There are of course 2 more books in this trilogy, which April trilogies only have 3 books. Well, Douglas Adams doesn't like to stay with conventions. So, it is still considered a trilogy, but it's got 5 books in it. And the last book isn't even written by Douglas Adams. I don't know what to think about that, but when I eventually get there, I will let you know what I think about that. I finally got my hands on Miss Mayhem by Rachel Hawkins, so I can continue on the Rebel Belle series. And it went in line with how I felt with the first book. In the second book, Harper is still dealing with becoming the guardian of David and what all of that means, and dealing with having to work with her ex-boyfriend and just life and senior year, and all of this book just felt like a lot of teen angst to me, which I guess I just wanted more like action stuff and less angst. But it is what it is, I guess. It wasn't a horrible read, and of course the pop culture references that, like I said before, Hawkins always puts in her stories are great, and they're usually what keeps me reading. But I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars. And I picked up my first Stephen King's book. You should be proud of me, because I am a horrible, 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 creepy horror reader and have never picked up a Stephen King's book. Not sure why. I just haven't, I guess. I picked up this little read so I could get a feel of Stephen King's writing, and this is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. This is probably not a good first Stephen King's book to pick up now that I have read it. This is a book about Trisha who gets lost in the woods. Flips back and forth between her home life and her trying to survive in the woods, and she ends up having this connection with this baseball player, Tom Gordon, that just keeps her going as she's lost in the woods. This book was a little slow for me. I kept on wanting something epic to happen, but most of the read was just her trying to survive, trying to find civilization, and the realities of what happens when you eat something that you shouldn't, and what it does to your body, and how you have to deal. This was a very real book. It was. It wasn't what I expected from Stephen King's. I don't know. Like I said, I kept on expecting something to happen, and it really didn't happen until nearly the end, and even when it did happen, it was a little underwhelming for me. I don't know. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I then picked up Magana by Maria Headley. This is about a girl named Aza who has difficulty breathing, but she starts to notice weird things in the sky, and she starts to hear her name being called. And then eventually she ends up with the Magonian people up in the sky. So she has to learn how to live among the Magonian people who live in these floating ships or floating houses in the sky, and basically just take what they need from the people down below. It's an interesting concept. There are some elements of the Magonian people, if I can call them people, that I found a little weird and I couldn't really connect to. And then came the problem of me starting to feel like this was a Fern Gully type novel for the sky, and what we're doing to that realm, and slap on the wrist and all that kind of thing. And I started to get a little defensive about that, especially with what the Magonian people were doing to the other people down below. It felt a little hypocritical to me, and I don't know. There was just some things I couldn't really wrap my brain around. I found it extremely interesting what they were trying to do with the book, and I would love to see what happens next. Maybe that'll clear up some questions that I have, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And lastly, book number 13. I picked up The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This is a story about Nella, who gets married to a man from Amsterdam, and she comes into this house not really knowing anything about the family and what her role as a wife is going to be. This is a house of a lot of secrets, and to kind of keep her placated for a time, she is given this dollhouse. She then gets in contact with the miniaturist to start filling this house with objects from the house. Then oddly, these little pieces start to represent a lot of what is going on in the house. By the time I finished this book, I had no idea why I read it. I was confused on what point was trying to be made. I didn't know what to think. I was confused. It was depressed. It was just, I didn't understand what the role of the miniaturist in the story really was, how it either enhanced or moved the plot along. I couldn't make that connection to everything else that was going on, because to me it felt like it wasn't needed. And then the story itself, while it had a lot of things going on, it didn't feel like, I don't know, I was all over the place when I was thinking about this book. Like I said, I didn't really come away with anything that I felt like the author was trying to tell me. And so I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. I didn't understand where the plot was going, why the plot was going, how the plot was going. And yeah. Which might have been another reason why I just stopped reading for the month and just let things simmer in my brain. So that was my October reading month. If you haven't seen my mid-October book haul, once again, I will link up there and down there so you can check it out. Let me know what you were for Halloween. I heard your beautiful faces. Bye. Oh, and of course, just gonna keep on rolling. Rolling. See them going rolling. Right.